special partnership and brought to you by FutureLeaderNow. Today at Soulfront, I will be having a conversation with Morenike Olaosebikan, who is a pharmacy owner and activist who runs the Ribbon Rouge Foundation that looks to provide education on zero HIV transmission. She's also an artist, so there's a lot of disciplines that she is involved in. The one topic she's passionate about is collaborative intelligence, which is the idea of collaborating over geographical spaces, collaborating through different disciplines, different expertise, and working on big ideas. So one idea that she is interested in right now and working on is health and manufacturing drugs and being able to do it differently, do it in a way that is decentralized. So it's a fun conversation, a lot of twists and turns. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Morenike, thank you so much for being a part of the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk with me. You're one of my favorite people.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Scott.
Well, we're going to explore a number of different things, but what I want to start off with is just kind of talking a little bit about the things that you are passionate about. You are definitely passionate about health as a pharmacist owner. And being a professional in that space. You're an artist, an activist. So there's a whole bunch of different things that we want to touch on. But one topic that you talked about that you're also passionate about was collaborative intelligence. And I'm not sure if folks out there, really understand that idea. What I've been able to look up is collaborative intelligence is the ability to contribute and manage power found in networks of people. So that's the idea of collaborative intelligence. But before we get into that, and I think we're going to have a great conversation, I just want to start by asking you, what are you up to? And what are you doing right now that is happening in your life?
I laugh because that's a loaded question, Scott. So I think the top 3 out of probably 20 some things that I'm up to is I'm building a startup in African countries and in Canada to manufacture medications. And I am also still operating a not-for-profit called the Ribbon Rouge Foundation, which uses arts to achieve health equity using arts-based health research and some programming involving the arts in universities and colleges, as well as sexual health promotion activities. And I'm still running my pharmacy, Shoppers Drug Mart, on Wayne Gretzky Drive as well. So those would be the top 3 things that I am up to, Scott.
Oh my God, yeah, those are big top 3 items. That's
top 3.
There's a lot of stuff going on. And I know you're always busy and excited about doing different types of work. So, I kind of gave a definition off the top of what collaborative intelligence is, but can you talk a little bit about that idea and how it is a part of, the different things that you're doing right now?
Yeah, I think for me, the way I've come to understand it and see it work is that you have very different people, very distant things, very distant professions and disciplines. And if we're able to find a way to work together, I think there is this juiciness that comes out of bringing distant things for innovation, connecting them and seeing what comes out, what emerges from that. So for me, collaborative intelligence is not just the fact that people are coming together. It's the fact that very different and very distant things are being brought together, or distant things and people are being brought together, ideas, resources, in a way that you then have something very new and refreshing and exciting come out of that. And so, and in that collaboration, they don't just morph into one thing. They're still distinct. You're still able to see the autonomy and the differences in these people and in these thoughts and in these ideas. And yet they've found this sort of this sort of interesting way to work together and to come up with something new together, something bigger and better together. So that's for me what I see to be or think of as collaborative intelligence.
Mm-hmm. With maybe one of these three projects. No, your work is your work, right? But maybe let's talk about how collaborative intelligence is a part of what you're trying to do right now.
Of course. So for the manufacturing operation, the idea shows up in decentralized manufacturing. And so what had happened was over the past 2 years, I'd been really engrossed in this problem of medication access in African countries and why it is that we still have unmet health needs when it comes to drugs. Why is it that I still get these phone calls where people are near death and needing medications and panicking and calling to ask me how I can ship medications to them? How come 94% of our drugs are being imported and 70% of them are fake? And so it's really became a thing of concern for me. And so I traveled and I asked questions and I investigated and came up with this idea and this thought that, you know what, the status quo of the way drugs are manufactured actually isn't working. And what would have to happen if we could decentralize that, if we could distribute manufacturing across countries so
Mm-hmm.
that each region is able to develop its own capacity and supply itself? And I started to imagine the kind of social impact this could have because you now have people who are highly skilled and can be employed in their own countries, in their own regions. And so you now have this upstream effect of employment, and you now have basically contributions to countries' GDP and balance of trade, and these larger economic issues around how countries can sustain themselves. And so for me, this is one of the places recently that this idea of collaborative intelligence shows up because you're able to bring very different types of people together to see how do you solve this how do you contribute to these sustainable development goals. And at the same time, you're doing it in a distributed network. So you still have autonomy in each region, as well as collaboration with global partners in the expertise that you now need to execute on this sort of idea. And it turns out I'm not alone in thinking this because initially when I was thinking through this and coming through conceptualizing what this might look like, I thought, where else can I see examples of this? And it turns out that, you know, the US had been having drug shortages 8 years ago, and very similar concepts actually came about because of that. They're still in their nascent stages of innovation, but there I do have a counterpart now in the US that's also thinking about these issues and thinking about them in the same way at scale. And Canada also has had drug shortages for the past 4 years. So there's a way now that this idea of how can you decentralize manufacturing and collaborate and bring very different thought leaders from engineering, from business, from the communities and patients that are affected, and bring people together to think through these problems from their different perspectives and do it in a way that's autonomous and collaborative at the same time. I think that's very, very, very fascinating to me. I hope I haven't theorized it too much and people
Well,
get the picture of what I'm saying.
actually, Nikki, we've talked about this a bit, and just, I mean, very practically, the technology of making this manufacturing of drugs on the ground. Can
Yeah.
you talk about like how that would work, or how could it work?
Yeah. So basically, you would end up having what I'm now calling a factory in a box. You would just have a factory in a box in which you can put it together quickly, and you have different expertise that constitute the personnel that would fulfill your medication manufacturing. And so you have personnel that could include engineers, You would have personnel that would include health and safety and compliance and chemists and different sort of thought leaders and thinkers on that. And then you would also need to have the relationships with your customers, of course, and in the countries that we're manufacturing in, the main customers are not necessarily the end users. And so figuring out all these human networks and how they would have to come together to make sure that your distributed manufacturing systems actually work has been a very exciting process for me, figuring out how to bring key stakeholders and when to bring key stakeholders onto that, into that conversation.
You know, in 2015, Markova and MacArthur, these are this authors of this book, Competitive Intelligence, Thinking with People Who Think Differently. And what they're trying to get at is, in the past, market share companies kind of ruled the top-down hierarchy of leadership. And now new market leaders have a mind share kind of thought process where influence is more important than power. Success relies on collaboration and the ability to inspire. So, you know, when they did, you know, research with Fortune 500 companies, they asked these companies about their biggest challenges at work. And what their clients cited was a common problem was other people. So other people were were the problem, and it really reflects what we've been taught, which is to focus on the gulfs between us rather than valuing our diversity and being able to bring that together to achieve results. So, you know, what they got from the research that they did was companies that are able to embrace this idea of collaborative intelligence, where you do bring people together, they find that they're able to solve bigger problems, and they're able to solve problems in a way that can leapfrog existing types of companies. So would that be your why, in terms of why this makes sense? Or,
to be honest, there's something about it. Like, so I really have this thought process around self in system. You can't change a system if you haven't really been self-reflective and have like a reflexive process or a reflexive approach to how you're engaging systems. And even for me, in what I'm currently doing, so I'm a pharmacist, artist, activist, dabble into everything, learn a little bit about everything kind of person. And all of a sudden, I find myself in this world where the ideas I've conceived are so far out of the realm of things that I've studied that I have to bring together chemical engineering with pharmaceutical engineering, with mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and even in the business, there's the supply chains, and then there's the marketing, and there's the strategy, and it's all so different from pharmaceutical knowledge. And what I realized is the actual, when you apprentice the problem, that's what I called what I was doing for the past 2 years, where you actually go and you live with the problem and you really empathize and you really try to understand the root causes and historical determinants even of the issues. What you very quickly learn is there is actually no way to know all the things you now need to know to solve this issue. And I guess that's the thing that complex problems have in common, is that, first of all, it's hard to even define the problem. And then if you think you have a definition of a problem, it's probably going to change in a few years. And also, the potential solutions to the complex problem is not going to be just a, you touch this magic button and it disentangles itself. It's quite possibly going to require some kind of collective intelligence and some way to see the issues from multiple different places and in multiple different ways. And so all of a sudden, you're forced now to collaborate, because how are you going to address this issue without bringing different people together? I think it's really funny that people would blame other people for being the problem, because it does feel that way. it does feel that, you know what, it sounds like fun and rosy to say these things like, oh, we need to collaborate, but the actual process of collaboration
It's tough.
can be a point of soul searching and a point of having to be humble and to actually have a series of practices for how the self engages in the system.
So I went and I looked at a top 10 list of, you know, what you can do in in a collaborative intelligence environment to make it work. And so I'm going to read off these top 10, and, you know, maybe I'll make you smile or give you some thoughts, but I want you to kind of take these in and then tell me what you think. So
Okay.
the first one is the willingness to collaborate, then willingness to share, knowing how to share, knowing what to share, how to build trust, understanding team dynamics, hubs, bridging, and networking is important, mentoring and coaching, open to new ideas, and then embracing tools and technology. So
Those all sound really, really good and really, really true. In particular, the bridging part, I think, is a part that gets taken for granted, and it's also something that you can read and understand in an abstract way, but not necessarily know how to embody that. And so in my work, so we talked about distributed and decentralized manufacturing, but there's also something to consider about um, even in my work as an activist and a change agent for health justice for people of African descent, there's a way that society constructs people of African descent where you just see people that are African, Caribbean, Black, and you just think Black, right? But within these communities, we know that we are thousands of ethnicities, and we're really quite different people in terms of the culture and traditions and heritage that we've inherited. In those terms, we can be quite different. And so in the work I've had to do, there's actually this huge element of how do you bridge that? How do you bridge within African Caribbean Black communities? And how do you bridge between African Black communities and mainstream structures and systems? And how do you do that to tap into the wealth of resources on both sides of this piece? And bridging in a really practical way for me has now become actual people that I can think of. Like, so if I'm trying to enter into a certain space and gather information or exchange information or move certain actions, I have to actually think of who are the people that serve as bridges here between these groups of people and this sort of people, or what are the tools and technology or things that actually help me bridge.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, of your list, I think they all sound actually really quite real. The bridging one, I would say, has been one that I've had to really mature and think through this past few years as I've tried to move things forward in all the spaces I described.
I going back to your original idea where you said the juiciness of innovation is connecting distant things with distant people. It seems also that right now, when constraints are upon us with COVID-19, and we're just not able to see each other face to face, it's also kind of broken down barriers in a way where, you know, we're reaching out like this, but, you know, this could be, you know, internationally, or it could be done where you have groups of people all getting together from different places. Are you finding that, you know, this pandemic in a way has accelerated some of your ideas?
Oh, yeah. So the idea of manufacturing in the way that I'm conceiving it now has become, initially it was being proposed as a solution for African countries because of some of the things I'd learned, like it taking 6 months for certain countries to be able to receive their imports from the day they ordered it. And so I, from those initial conversations, had conceived this idea as something that would solve issues in African context. Um, and especially for pandemics. And then a pandemic actually then hit. And now in Canada, the necessity to have manufacturing localized and to consider supply chains around life-saving medications has definitely served as an accelerator for bringing the invention to life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about people being, at the beginning, wanting hand sanitizer, and then personal protective equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and now vaccines,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, right? So it's
And
just,
there are now drug shortages that have been exacerbated by tier 3 drug shortages from Health Canada.
yeah, because in a way, supply chains break down, communication might increase in a strange way over the internet, or just being able to communicate through social media. But with the supply chains breaking down, you almost need to decentralize, or at least be thinking about decentralization.
Yeah.
So the other part of collaborative intelligence that I wanted to get into is just those interrelationships and how you make it work. I read about just actually the interrelationship between artificial intelligence and people. And what I came across was, everyone's worried about artificial intelligence just replacing everybody, but how do you think of it in a collaborative manner? And, what are the things that humans actually can do for machines, which we actually have to train the machines. Believe it or not, we still have to train AI. We have to be able to explain to other people why AI made those decisions. Like, oh, that it decided to do this. Why did it do? I have no idea. Why did I take that loan? I don't know why. We have to check with the AI experts who can explain it.
Yeah.
And then sustaining, just making sure that people are safe on the roads, and you're constantly maintaining and checking the artificial intelligence. So humans have a role to play in that equation, and then machines amplify what we already do. Interact. They can embody a lot of things, and just provide flexibility, speed, scale, decision making, just the whole ton of things. So that's kind of an interrelationship between AI and human beings. But even looking at collaborative intelligence in terms of just people to people, like there's different types of people. There's analytic people. There are innovative people. There are relationship focused people, people who are procedural. There's all different types. And when you're trying to bring people together, how do you manage those relationships and make it work?
See, I don't know if you've read this book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, I think it is.
Yeah, I've looked at it.
Okay. You should read it. That book is pretty awesome to answer your question. I feel like the answer is that book. The thing about people is there is no cookie cutter answer to that question. There's no this is the way you do that, or this is the particular methodology or even approach and frameworks. I've just learned over time, and who knows, maybe I'll do this for another few years and I'll come up with the magic bullet that I will then publish and be like, take that, Ben Horowitz. But for now, honestly, people are just people, and hard things are hard things. And there's actually, in my mind, no clear strategy or thing about that. It's decisions that you make in the moment that will change, that are very customized to the situation. Maybe I can say that in general, when it comes to distinct groups and collectives of people, or communities of people, or people who tend to have some kind of cohesive features that you're trying to connect with another bunch, that generally there are the insiders, and then there are the people who bridge. And so generally I've found that I had to figure out in which situation I'm an insider and in which situation am I a bridge. And if I'm trying to connect two different very distinct populations or cohesive groups of people, and I'm an outsider, I now have to figure out who's the insider here, who's the insider here, who are the potential bridges here, or am I the one that's now going to have to figure out how to be the bridge? And so that's basically how I've played it now. So if I'm trying to figure out government relationships in South Sudan, and I'm trying to connect government relations in South Sudan to a bunch of technical expertise in the US, I'm now having to figure out in this situation who's the domain expert, who's the insider, like what sort of roles are they playing in this potential connection that I'm trying to make, and then figure out how to then connect based on the insiders on the two and the potential person who might be the bridge. I would say that much about the process, the actual process of connecting or moving change forward across diversity. But other than that, I would say that even with that, and other than that, it really is people working together can be a hard thing when they're very different. And when it does work, it can be a very rewarding experience. So,
Yeah. But I like the idea of being able to reflect on where you think your role is in that situation, and that could change even through the project or whatever you're doing. So that's thoughtful. I want to finish on this thought. I want to finish on this thought, and I'd like you to finish this thought. So there's something about collaborative intelligence changing how we see and do work.
Because it has the potential to solve some major complex issues in our world. And at the same time, it has the potential, if we engage in it properly, thoroughly, with full heart, it has the potential to also change who we are as human beings on an individual level.
Awesome. And break down barriers.
And break down barriers, for sure. Yeah. Man, isn't it what we need at this time? Thinking about
I just need
all of Yep. That's
somebody other than my immediate family.
Virtual hug.
Nikki, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with me.
It's a pleasure, as always.
Appreciate it. All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
Talk soon.
Thank you for your support. Please remember to click subscribe so we can bring you more remarkable interviews with extraordinary leaders.